Hi, my name is Joshua Hill of Josh Hill Politics, and today I wanted to talk about a specific issue regarding the lesser of two evils. Um, for a while now, I've had a very controversial position on this issue among the left, as I really think that the establishment Democrats are the greater evil, even when compared to like Trump and the Republicans. Um, so I kind of want to make this argument um, using somebody else's argument, or at least some of their experiences, their anecdotal experiences, um, of somebody who vehemently disagrees with me on this position, somebody who is publicly um, made aware that they would vote for the lesser of two evils, the neoliberalism over the fascism, as they would put it. But I personally think that neoliberalism is a particular uh, type of fascism, but that's an argument for another day. Um, Kyle Kalinske of Secular Talk, who is Kyle is a predominant, popular YouTube uh, political commentator, and he recently had a back and forth with another YouTuber, Vaush. And so these two recently got together and did a, a podcast together. Vosh went on Krystal, Kyle, and Friends, uh, Krystal and Kyle's uh, relatively new podcast. And although I haven't seen the entire podcast, I have only gotten to watch the clip that Kyle put on Secular Talk, and I want to talk about that today, and I kind of want to um, kind of make my argument for why I think the Democrats, or at least this status quo establishment Democrats, are the greater evil when in comparison to Trump and the Republicans. Not that I'm any fan of Trump or the Republicans. I think Trump is just horrendous. He's is awful as they come, with the exception of maybe the you know the people who let him get into power in the first place. But so I want to play some clips from this clip, and to be fair, I haven't listened to the entire podcast, as I've said. I will at some point, but when I listen to an extended, like, longer uh, video or audio of something, I generally want to make sure I'm doing something else so I can, I have the time to listen to it in its entirety and not just like little bits here and there. So I need to set aside time to do that, and I wouldn't be able to, or I haven't been able to in recent times. So I'll get around to that eventually, and maybe I'll talk more about that um, when I watch the entire thing. But right now, I kind of want to not comment even on this clip, but on the issue of the lesser of two evils, using some of the statements made in this particular video. And so, with that said, let's take a look at this. I'm gonna, the whole video is 13 minutes long, so I'm not gonna play the entire video for you. I will leave a link to the video in the description box below, so you can go to the video and see the entirety of the context yourself. It's mostly just Vosh and Krystal going back and forth, talking about what Krystal um, does with her show and why she works with somebody like Sagar, and Vaush specifically uh, kind of responding to that. So let's take a look at this video and then we'll talk about it.
I've seen a lot of your solo content the past couple of months, and I find it generally extremely agreeable. I think that I think that you have a very specific intention when you do your work on Rising, that you when you work with Sagar, right? And it's to convince people fundamentally that the Democratic Party is bad. This is a noble goal, okay? It's one that I agree with. And it's one that I think that you are very effective in delivering in many instances as well, because some of the blatant hypocrisies of the Democratic Party, I feel like they can be very it can be very difficult to call them out unless you're willing to go like full hog on it. You know what I mean? Going the full hog, you really go into it, and I respect the hell out of that. Sometimes I feel like these criticisms, they implicitly downplay the threat of the Republican Party, which works sometimes as a rhetorical strategy. Because again, the more afraid people are of the Republican Party, the more likely they are to accept anything the Democratic Party will give them. So you need to do that to an extent, but at the same time, I disagreed with the extent to which you seem to at some points.
All right, so Vaush makes the claim that he believes Krystal's job is to um, critique the Democratic Party in a way that makes them look bad, which he himself admits is a accurate assessment of the Democratic Party, and that they are, in fact, bad. He says sometimes he believes she goes too far. Now, with Krystal, her response was basically that she believes her job isn't just to say that the Democratic Party is bad, because the Democratic Party really isn't bad. It's more of a empty vessel full of really shitty bad people. Um, but her job, that she believes, is to bring people together so she can talk to Sagar and she can talk to, you know, the American people basically, and bring both sides together, and unite essentially in our anger for, or toward, and direct that anger towards the establishment, of both sides, the Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment. Now, Vaush says that he believes Krystal is going too far in critiquing the Democratic Party, or in how far she goes to say that they are bad. He uses the example. It's after this bit he goes on to give the example that he believes it's. But one example was the January 6th insurrection, I guess you'd call it. And I mean, I actually I don't support that insurrection at all. I think it's terrible. I think the people who did that should go to jail. I don't personally think that what Donald Trump was illegal, because he had some wiggle room, and he didn't technically incite it. He didn't say, "Hey, go and do this." So I have a very controversial take on that, because if Donald Trump is ultimately responsible for and look, what he said, wasn't good, and yeah, he does play to those crazies in his base. But if you go after Trump for the insurrection, and say that it's entirely his fault, and that, like, legal there should be legal repercussions for what he did, then I don't agree with that. Because what happens when someday a President Nina Turner or somebody says, we gotta fight the establishment. They use vague words, or not vague words, but more like, could be interpreted as incitement. We got to march on Washington, or we got to do this, or we got to make them scared of us. We got, anything that could be words that anti-establishment lefties use all the time towards the establishment. So if you go after Trump for that, when there's clear wiggle room, and he didn't use direct threats of violence, he didn't, there's no libel or slander there, then it's going to ultimately be turned around and used on the left. But anyway, all of that is irrelevant, because even if you hate my position on that, totally fine. The actual argument I want to make has nothing to do with that, and I think ultimately it is in fact irrelevant to the conversation, as I don't think that Krystal goes too far in saying that how bad the Democrats are, because I think the insurrection wouldn't have been possible without the Democrats. I don't think anything Trump has done would be possible without the Democrats, the establishment Democrats, the corporate establishment Democrats. Um, and we'll look at this second clip in this video, and then I'll go on and explain myself further.
One of the issues I have, because this is kind of the problem I have with right populism, it feels like every discussion I have with a right populist is like we agree for 40 minutes. Yeah, the establishment is bad. Workers in this country are being oppressed. Yeah, the media is like an oligarchy that's being used to distract people from meaningful issues. And then they get caught on some culture war talking point and instantly swap into fascism, like in a nanosecond. Like, I can spend all this time agreeing with them at a point, and then it'll be like, oh yeah, but Black Lives Matter is burning cities down, so we have to revoke citizenship and deport people and use like Secret Service black bags to take protesters away and interrogate them to find out which anarchist cells are ruling there. These are, so again, we're not talking Sagar. I've had convos with people like this,
Yeah.
but it's a thing I've noticed too. Same with trans issues too. People will agree on like everything. Like, yeah, you know, I think workers need more rights. I think the Republican Party has gone crazy. I think et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, trans women using the same bathroom as my daughter, I don't know. So I'm going to abandon every other position I've just spent the past 40 minutes agreeing with you on and vote Republican because I'm that in favor of whatever meaningless virtue signal anti-civil rights bills they're going to pass that'll last 3 years before they get overturned and the whole country moves on from this. And that's a pattern that I've noticed. And I don't know how much being anti-establishment means if you're willing to drop all of it
Right.
over a culture war issue.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly the problem. So Vaush in that second clip gives that experience of him talking to right-wing individuals who will agree with him on economics for 40 minutes of the conversation, as he claims, and then they'll get towards the end of the conversation, and then all of a sudden, when they get to culture, a cultural issue will come up, and all of a sudden that right winger doesn't agree with you. But as shown in like every example and polling data and every conceivable situation, that right winger, if given an option between a populist left, progressive, and even the fake populist right winger who agrees with them on cultural issues, they'll still choose the populist left progressive. Look at Bernie Sanders when he went to the town halls for the polling data backs this up, but you can see it in real time. You can see it in person when Bernie Sanders goes to those town halls and he says very progressive economic policies out loud, and everybody cheers. Everybody says, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders if he had been the nominee. The establishment Democrats, they rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders, but even if they hadn't, let's say somehow they hadn't, and they still Hillary Clinton still legitimately won. When the reason why that right winger isn't agreeing with you on those or is still voting for the Republican is because the Democrat isn't offering them the first 40 minutes of agreement on economic issues that you were in alignment with the conservative that you were having that discussion with. So when you have that discussion with the right winger for 40 minutes and you agree for the first 40 minutes and you agree on economic policies, if there was a Democrat who was running who agreed with them on economic policies, they would win out. But since they know that the Democrat doesn't agree with them on, in fact, it'll actively go out of their way to harm that individual, that right winger, on economic policy. Well, then what do they have left to vote for? All they have is the cultural stuff. They don't agree with you on cultural stuff. That's just how it is. So when you have, the Republican, you have the establishment Democrat who says, I supported NAFTA, and I supported the TPP, and I supported the permanent normal trade relations with China, and I supported, you know, um, uh, all of the offshore trade agreements, all of them under the sun, and I, you know, I shipped all those jobs overseas. So you lost your job now. You lost your job now because of me, the establishment Democrat. And I'm in favor of all the illegal wars. I'm going to send your family and loved ones overseas to die in illegal wars. And you know, they actively oppose Medicare for all, and they don't actively oppose the minimum wage, but then they don't put it in their budget reconciliation. You know what? It's not that important. Let's not get into that. But they do all these neoliberal policies that hurt them, that hurt those people. And they know, the Republican voter knows that, at least, that, hey, this status quo, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me at all. It fucks me over every single time. My life only gets worse and worse and worse. So if I have to choose between two parties, both of which will fuck me on economics, and I don't agree with either one, but at least I agree with the right wing on cultural issues, and I disagree with the left wing on cultural issues, I would have voted for the Democrat if the Democrat had supported the economic policies, the populist, left, progressive, and socialist economic policies, and the right winger wouldn't call those policies by those political science terms, but he would support those policies. You know, even a majority of Republicans support Medicare for all. Like, you would at least get a big enough number of those Republicans to vote for the Democrat. And the Democrat that would, FDR won 4 times. The Republicans had to invent term limits because they knew they would never win an election again if you kept getting these types of lefties in office. But instead we get the Joe Bidens, we get the Hillary Clintons, and Hillary Clinton didn't win the presidency, but like, here's how it goes. The establishment Democrats' neoliberal policies disenfranchise the American people so badly, crush the American people so badly, that they are willing to take a chance on somebody like Donald Trump in the first place, out of justifiable desperation, because they know the status quo has fucked them, and they cannot live under those kinds of conditions anymore. They are desperate for anything else that even remotely works for them. And yes, Donald Trump didn't work for them, but he did campaign in 2016 further to the left of Hillary Clinton. And in some cases, even in 2020, riding on, some of those things, like going after Joe Biden for some of his conservative positions, or even, bolstering about his stimulus checks and whatnot. But when you have the establishment Democrats offering nothing, actively terrible policies that will take people in the wrong direction and will crush their lives more, and you have the Republicans offering the same economically, well, then, yeah, the Republican might agree with you on 45% of policy, but they don't agree with Biden on 45 or 40 minutes of policy, 40 minutes worth of a conversation of progressive policies. The neoliberal policies of Barack Obama, of Bill Clinton, led to George W. Bush, of Barack Obama led to Donald Trump, and Joe Biden could lead to President Tucker Carlson, or somebody that much worse, or maybe just Donald Trump again. The problem is that the establishment Democrats, they clear the path. They elevate the right-wing fascists, as you call them, which they are, into power. But because of neoliberal fascism, that makes that possible. And without neoliberal fascism, that wouldn't be possible. So ultimately, what you get is neoliberal status quo corporate policy that crushes the American people's lives. And so they just go back and forth from Republican to Democrat, which wouldn't be the case. Like I said, FDR got elected 4 times, and if you would just keep running FDRs, and FDR style Democrats for the rest of the time, you would just never lose again. You would never lose an election ever again. So my point is that because of the neoliberal Democrats elevating the Republicans into power, they are responsible for that. If they didn't rig the election against Bernie Sanders, first of all, every poll showed Bernie Sanders won by an overwhelming landslide. And Hillary Clinton's polling data with Trump's was within like the 1 to 3% margin with a 3% margin room for error. And like she was ahead a little bit, but like there were other polls where she wasn't. There was some polls where she was behind. It was a lot closer. And people knew she was the status quo. Honestly, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I don't think Biden would have won. Biden would have lost, I think, easily. He only won by a few thousand votes in a few key states. And if not for the pandemic, if everything had just kept chugging along the way it was, I don't think the enthusiasm for Biden would have been there. I think Biden would have lost in 2020, and just like Hillary Clinton did in 2016. So it's the establishment neoliberal corporate Democrats that elevate the right-wing fascists into power in the first place. Because without them, you would without those neoliberal Democrats, without those corporate neoliberal Democrats, you would never have Donald Trump in power. After Obama, not only did you get Donald Trump, but the Republicans took over the Senate. They took the majority of they took the presidency. They took the majority of the Senate. They took the majority of the House. They took the majority of governorships. They took the majority of state and local offices. They wiped out the Democrats on every level of government. Okay? So that is because those neoliberal policies were not working for the American people, and they were desperate to go in any other direction. If you actually improve the standard of living in people's lives with populist, left, progressive, social democratic, socialist policies, whatever you want to call it, then you help their lives. You give them health care. You give them a living wage. You give tuition. You cancel their student loan debt, tuition-free public college and universities, ending the foreign wars, ending the disastrous offshore trade agreements, guaranteed paid time off, a Green New Deal, comprehensive campaign finance reform in the form of publicly funded free and fair elections that actually fixes the system. You implement these policies. You fight for them too. You have to fight for them. At least fight for them, then you win. You win every single time. It's not even close. So when you have the neoliberal Democrats, they allow for the further and further and further right-wing Republicans to get into power in the first place, because it's only gone further. It's only gone from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush, and then from Obama to Donald Trump. It only keeps going further and further right. The only way to get it back to where it needs to be is to go left. And I know that should be obvious. But when you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're only voting for it to get further right. And it's worse, because now in Joe Biden's case, not only do you have to deal with 4 to 8 years of Joe Biden's neoliberal crushing policies, but because of those neoliberal policies, like as I stated, you'll have to wait for the next Republican to take his place, because those neoliberal policies are going to crush people so badly that they'll take a chance on the next Republican, the next crazy Donald Trump, if not Donald Trump again. And then so you have 4 to 8 years of the neoliberal Democrat, then 4 to 8 years of the next crazy-ass Republican who's even further right-wing than Donald Trump, if not Donald Trump in his... And he got even worse. Look at 2016. He was advocating for further left policies to Hillary Clinton. By the end, he was passing his own NAFTA and his own, It will only get worse if you keep electing the neoliberal Democrats forever. And if you just bow to them and give them your vote every single time, then they have zero reason to ever do anything good or for the American people. They will never do progressive policies, because at that point, they don't need they know your vote's locked in. So they're only gonna pursue more and more right-wing votes, because they know there's no reason to not even pander to you anymore. So that's ultimately why the neoliberal Democrats are worse, because without them, they clear the path. They elevate the right wing into power, and they move the political spectrum further and further right. And without them, that wouldn't be possible. If we just had FDR's, since FDR, the country would be a much better place, and we wouldn't have ever gotten the right-wingers for president that we got. We just wouldn't have. And that goes for the entirety of Congress as well. I mean, if you don't offer anybody anything economically, yeah, they're going to vote on cultural issues. That's just like they're going to vote. They're going to vote where they're getting something they agree with. And if the only thing you're offering them is the culture war, yeah, they're going to go in that direction, because you're not offering them anything else. You're not offering them policy on an economic progressive front. You're offering them what? Neoliberal policy, which people know the status quo, the corporate policies of the establishment status quo does not help them, actively hurts them. And yeah, so all you have left are the people who are only voting for those people because they think they're slightly less worse than the alternative, which, as I explained, they're not, because they lead to the next much worse Republican. That's their fault. And everything that Republican does, who they got into power, is also their fault. When it's so easily preventable. Donald Trump should have been the easiest person to beat in the, like, he had record unfavorability ratings. It was the easiest election to win in the history of the United States. And not only did Hillary Clinton lose, but Joe Biden almost lost. And he only won because the fucking stars aligned for him. So, I mean, what are we talking about here? How is it? I mean, I said it in the beginning of my video that this was controversial, but how is it controversial to claim a fact that without the neoliberal Democrats, we wouldn't get further and further right-wing Republicans with every election cycle? And how does that not become their responsibility and their fault as well? So, as far as I'm concerned, look, both sides are terrible. But if you go to a zoo and then somebody pushes you into the tiger exhibit or the lion exhibit, and the lions and tigers maul you to death, they kill you, and like, isn't it kind of the person who pushed you? Like, the lions and tigers, they're mindless animals, much like the establishment Republicans. But the person who pushed you, ooh, that's who's at fault. If you hadn't been pushed in the first place, you never would have been in that situation. If the establishment Democrats didn't push you in the first place, Republicans would have, right-wing voters would have never been in that position. where they felt they needed to vote for Trump to basically throw a Molotov cocktail at the system, you know? At Look, and this isn't anything against Vaush. I barely watch his content. So I don't know that much about him. I know he has that position. I did a little bit of research before making this video. And as far as like Kyle and Krystal, they're actually my two favorite political commentators in the, I guess at all. I was going to say in the new media sphere, but outside of new media, it only gets terrible from there. So, yeah, so this is, like I said, nothing against Vaush. I just disagree, and I have this I guess it's controversial because it's a very unpopular opinion that, yeah, the establishment Democrats ultimately make things worse over time. And on immediate policy, Joe Biden might be slightly less worse than Donald Trump. But in the long run, I think he's worse. I just do. And I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. Didn't vote for either of them because my conscience doesn't allow anything like that to go on. So I voted for Holly Hawkins, member of the Green Party. And I know the Green Party's not going to win. I'm not naive. I'm not stupid. But, I mean, it was either that or I'm just not voting. Because, and that's the thing. Neoliberals, they make their own base. For the most part, just not enthused. And they keep them home, basically. They either keep them home or they keep them voting third party. And it's just, it is the fault of the neoliberal Democrats for suppressing the vote, which both sides do in different ways. But the neoliberal Democrats just suck so hard that they naturally suppress the vote because their own base doesn't want to come out to vote for them. Independents and casual voters are like, no, like they both suck. So you get a lot of them that stay home. And then, yeah, you could win a lot of right-wingers. I mean, like I said, Bernie Sanders would have won over a lot of them. Bernie Sanders would have gotten, his own base. He would have gotten independents. He would have gotten a lot of right-wingers who would have voted for him over Trump. Like, if you run the populist left progressive, and Bernie Sanders isn't perfect. He is the compromise, but he is the acceptable compromise that would have been, that would have not only won in a landslide, but would have actually fight for the majority of policies that the majority of the American people are in favor of. So, yeah, I don't really know what more to add to it except the neoliberal Democrats are at fault. They are 100% at fault for the Republicans getting into power in the first place. And every time I see Donald Trump do something, I say that was when all his presidency. Even now, I say that was preventable. It was so preventable. You just even if Hillary Clinton had conceded on 3 to 4 just 3, 2, 1, maybe even just one fucking policy. Medicare for all. And she actively stopped taking corporate super PAC money, so you knew she was going to actually fight for that one policy. Just, it doesn't take much. It's so easily preventable. And that's because the neoliberal Democrats would rather lose to Donald Trump than win with a progressive. That's what it is. That's who the real enemy is. Because those two entities, the establishment neoliberal Democrats and the right-wing Republicans, the establishment of both sides, are more closely aligned with each other than the Democrats are with progressives. So That's why the neoliberal Democrats are more important of a fight than the Republicans, because you have to beat them first before you can go fight the Republicans. They are standing in the way of progress before the Republicans are. It's just how it is. It's just how it is. So for anyone who didn't like the quality of this video and thinks it was just absolute dog shit to look at, I totally understand, 100% kind of agree with you. I'm working on building a studio actually right now. I just have my video game poster wall in the background here. But I'm also working on getting some better equipment as well. So, you know, this fuzzy, grainy look won't be a problem, hopefully, sometime in the future. Until then, this is a temporary look. Um, Sorry for this next part, but if you enjoyed the video and like and agree with what I had to say, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you disliked the video and absolutely couldn't disagree more and viscerally hated uh, my video and everything I had to say, and maybe even me, well, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, guys, and have a fantastic rest of your day.